Yale historian Timothy Snyder has for years now been warning of the eerie similarities between our current political trajectory and the rise of authoritarianism in early 20th century Europe. He points out that Trump's recasting of January 6th rioters as martyrs in his campaign speech last weekend has some chilling echoes in the past. Before Hitler came to power, chief Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels worked hard to find a violent Nazi who could be portrayed as a victim of the far left. He eventually found a dubious character called Horst Wessel, who became the subject of the Nazis' main song. Trump has made an eerily similar move, turning his coup criminals into musicians of martyrdom, end quote. Musicians of martyrdom. And this is not the only fascist tactic that Snyder sees in Trump's rhetoric. Trump's Ohio speech was riddled with dehumanizing language, specifically when it comes to immigrants. Language that Professor Snyder says summons up the fascist historical context. Here's some of what Trump said about migrants at the southern border.
They're in jail for years, if you call them people. I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but I'm not allowed to say that because the radical left says that's a terrible thing to say. They say you have to vote against him because did you hear what he said about humanity? I've seen the humanity, and these are bad, these are animals, okay? And we have to stop it.
Trump's dehumanization of immigrants, the martyrdom of the so-called January 6th hostages, these are the context, Snyder argues, for the moment in that speech that set off alarm bells for many people. A moment in which Trump threatened that if he loses in November, there's going to be a bloodbath. Here is exactly what he said.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. That'll be the least of it is important here. That part of the speech set off alarm bells for a reason, but the hand-wringing began immediately. What did Trump really mean? Was he just talking about cars, or was he actually threatening violence? Trump himself tried to clear it up today in an interview with the British far-right politician turned broadcaster Nigel Farage.
So bloodbath, talking about it's going to be a bloodbath in the auto industry because we're going to lose our whole industry because this guy's going to all electric cars and they're made in China.
Ah, bloodbath in the auto industry. Trump is saying nothing to see here. Liberals are getting stirred up about nothing. I was talking about cars. But as Professor Snyder points out, quote, Trump is calling for a bloodbath in front of people who stood to dishonor bloodshed, to honor bloodshed, people who have just sung with coup criminals, people whom he implicitly promises he will pardon if they carry out another insurrection. And he's doing this in the fascist style of telling a big lie that confers martyrdom upon criminals who try to overthrow a democracy they associated with subhumans. We should see Trump for what he is, an aspiring fascist who likes, wants, and needs violence, end quote. Joining us now is the Yale historian and Professor Tim Snyder. Professor, good to see you. Thank you for being here in person. This is a remarkable conversation because people have spent the last couple of days saying he was just talking about the cars. Now, I'm an economics reporter. We've not used that term, bloodbath, about cars. But what you write about is that it's the context. It's not just whether he said that sentence about cars. It's everything else he said in the speech, starting with the salute of the hostages.
Yeah, I mean, when he refers to the cars, he's then clearly switching gears. He's saying the cars will be the least of it.
Right.
It'll be a bloodbath for the whole country. And the folks who are saying the context is the cars, what they're actually doing is ripping it out of context. Because the context is the whole fascist history of violence, the whole fascist history of martyrdom cults, Trump's prior insurrection attempt in January of 2021, and the physical context that he's just got people to sing along with the criminals of January 6th. That's the real context.
You write, those who speciously insist that Trump had in mind an automotive bloodbath never mentioned that he had just celebrated criminals, repeated the big lie, dehumanized people, and followed fascist patterns. You lay out in your article the pattern of that speech. All of that was done before he brought up cars for one sentence and then went back to violence.
Before I came down here, I was talking to my 11-year-old daughter, and she said, you know, with dictators, Dad, you just have to listen to what they said. And so much of
She's learned well from
yeah, well, so much of this discussion, you just have to listen to what the man says. You can look for excuses in good faith or bad faith. You cannot want to look at what he's actually saying. You can decide that you like the bloodshed, so you're going to lie about it now. You can decide you're going to look away. But the actual context are those human beings around him who've been asked to identify by singing and standing with violent criminals who tried to overthrow our system. That's the context.
There's something important here. You've told us, we got the term the big lie, or we applied it to this from work that you had done. Donald Trump is not acting like a normal politician who expects to win or is even trying to win. He doesn't need to win more votes. He just needs to be in the ballpark because he's laid the groundwork for you not believing that he would have lost the election.
Yeah. It's also important in this speech, if we're talking about context, that at least 9 times he himself invokes the big lie.
Correct.
And in doing that, he embraces the people around him in this alternative reality. And then in alternative reality, it's not the number of votes that's going to count. It's the feeling of having won that's going to count. And that's why we have to understand his words as preparation for a November 24 insurrection. That's what he's after.
Let's think about the term we use these days is dog whistle. The idea that you say something that people who attune to it can hear. What's the historical precedent for this? Donald Trump says things. The rest of us can be hand-wringing about whether or not he meant automotive bloodbath or whether he didn't. But the point is it's landing with the people to whom he needs it to land.
Yeah, I mean, that's one point. It's definitely landing with the people around him. But I think we also have the problem that our immediate impulse is to say, well, let's try to find an excuse for him. Let's try to both sides this. Let's try to suppress this. No, you can only beat this sort of thing if you recognize what it is.
How do you think we should handle these sorts of things? Because we typically don't carry a Trump rally, but he has them all the time. And as you note in your article, this is not new. This is not weird. He just every time introduces something that he hasn't said before. But this concept of immigrants as animals or subhuman vermin poisoning the blood of the nation, this is not brand new. What do you do? What do you do in the face of this?
Yeah, first of all, cover the rallies. I mean, in 2016, his rallies predicted pretty well what kind of a president who's going to be, and we have the same thing again, and we're not covering the rallies well enough. There are some reporters doing it. Susan Glazer just wrote a nice piece. But in general,
she thinks people should. She thinks people should actually go listen to them or watch the whole thing, painful though it may be, to understand what's going on.
Take it all in, take it literally. Think about it, report on it, rather than just doing the kind of distant analysis, finding the excuses. Listen to the man, because as you say, his strategy is just get close enough to make some kind of a play. And we've got 6 or 7 months to explain to Americans that this is the bloodbath candidate, that what he's trying to do is get close enough and threaten violence. There are a lot of undecided voters out there, maybe folks not here in New York, but a lot of folks out there who haven't thought about this stuff yet. But when they hear what he's going to try to do, it will matter to them. That's political work to be done.
The problem, of course, is that everybody has this impulse to say he's just saying that. In fact, he said it was on Fox News this weekend, in which he talked about why he uses this inflammatory language. Let's just see if we can play this.
Here's my theory, that you use over-the-top, sometimes inflammatory language because that drives the media debate. Did Trump go too far? And then you get the next several news cycles talking about your issue and, whether your language was too much or wasn't enough. Any thought that I might be right on that?
It also gets people thinking about very important issues, that if you don't use certain rhetoric, if you don't use certain words that maybe are not very nice words, nothing will happen.
He's laying out the excuse for people who don't want to believe him. He's saying it's just rhetoric. It's to make people think about important things, calling people immigrants vermin and subhuman and talking about bloodbaths.
Well, if you listen to what he said, if you don't use the not very nice words, things won't happen. In other words, if you use the nasty words, things will happen. And he's right. I mean, the fascists, authoritarians, they didn't personally have to kill people.
Right.
They used language, and that specific dehumanizing language of calling people beasts and saying my opponents can't be in power because they're the ones who are on the side of the beasts, that has a very specific history. So the words are the actions. The words matter in themselves.
Because the goal is to get people to take on these ideas and deal with them.
The goal
themselves.
is to say these other people on that side, the ones who help the animals, they're not real Americans. They can't possibly be in power. This can't possibly be legitimate. And so combining it with the notion of elections that are faked, the idea that they're on the side of the subhumans is meant to rally people so that they think that violence is acceptable. And we know this can work, because his words caused violence on January 6, 2021. And he knows it can work, and that's what he's going for.
Professor, good to see you in person. Thank you for being with us. Professor Tim Snyder is a professor of history at Yale University.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah, I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're good on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
The Megatron.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. What's readiness? What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark. General! General! We need to immediately evacuate. Hold on. National security advisory. Stand down. Check it out. There is a celebration.